Our keynote speaker this evening, I have the privilege of introducing former Congressman Bruce Poliquin. Many of you know him. He served in Maine's 2nd Congressional District during the 2015 to 2018. He was the first Republican in nearly 20 years to serve in that district. He's widely respected for his hard work and passion in helping Maine families and small businesses. His work with President Trump and other House Republicans included helping to create the strongest economy that we've seen in 50 years. Prior to the U.S. House of Representatives, Mr. Poliquin served as the Maine State Treasurer, worked tirelessly with Governor LePage and the GOP legislative majority to put Maine's fiscal house in order. During his tenure, the Maine state government's debt clock was unwinding for the first time in memory. In the 2018 congressional race, Bruce won on Election Day, receiving 2,200 more votes than any of his 3 Liberal opponents. However, 9 chaotic days later, the only rank voting process for a federal office in the country awarded the seat to the second-place finisher, Jared Golden, the worst election scam in Maine history. Oh, he's a Marine. As the only serving child, Bruce decided not to run for elective office this cycle to help care for his aging parents in Maine. If I can say one thing before I finish and introduce Bruce, this, obviously we provide our own bios for me to read up here, and this does not do Bruce justice. One of the great things I enjoy about my job is the opportunity to interact with many of our political leaders and interact with them in a manner when the microphones are off and they don't have to be on. And I got to say, Bruce, that in the opportunities that we've had to sit down with each other when no one else was listening, it really does speak to your character as a person, and I appreciate all that you've done for the state and for the country. Bruce is a proud single father of his terrific son, Sam, having raised him since diapers after his wife tragically and suddenly died. It is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker this evening, former Congressman Bruce Poliquin.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate that. Jose, you have a very compelling story, and we welcome you to Maine. Of course, you've been here for a period of time, but where in the hell are the chocolates? Didn't you all have the exact same question? Here he is. He owns a chocolate factory, and he's supposed to give out samples. Well, where are they? I want to thank Peter and everybody else for putting on this event. This is really important for all the reasons that we've already heard. This really, really is important. It wasn't long ago, maybe 10 years ago, that the word socialism was a dirty word. You never really heard it. That's not the case today. It is mainstream, liberal, Democrat ideology. And it's more than ideology. I'm listening to the words that are being used tonight, and what I always remember is raising Sam. I bring everything back to Sam, who is a terrific young adult. He's 29 now. I still treat him like he's 8 because you do that with your kids. But I can't, forget about the time I once took Sam aside and said, Sam, remember that time that you got in trouble and I took you in my office and we sat down and we had that talk? He said, can I use the car keys? They don't remember that, but what they do remember is what you do. They remember what you do. You live by example of someone else, and you create an example for your kids and your grandkids. So today what I want to do is talk about what socialism looks like to us here in Maine, in this country. I'm going to give you very specific examples, and I'm trying to stay away from labels because you don't have to when you show what these policies will do and are doing as compared to the words. But I must say the following. Before we get there, we all remember the history of this country, which is so rich. And Jose, I have a tremendous respect for your country, your former country. Now you're one of us, and thank you for that. But, it wasn't more than, 245 years ago, Demi? We had this small group of colonies that stretched from New Hampshire down to South Carolina. Maine was part of New Hampshire. Who in the hell thought of that? part of Massachusetts, rather. Who in the heck would want to be part of Massachusetts? But in any event, we were. And I'll tell you, these British colonies were so upset with the way they were being treated by royalty across the pond that the leaders of these 13 colonies got together in Philadelphia. And they did something absolutely unthinkable at the time. They got together and they said, we had enough, we're free. We're going to become independent, of the greatest, at the time, strongest military on earth. We are free. We're declaring our freedom. That was amazing at the time. It had never been done before. And they went beyond. They said, instead of having royalty, a king or a queen, or the military rule the government, we're going to create a government that's based on the consent of the governed. It's the people's representatives that will govern us. So for the first time in history, human history, they were putting together a government of the people, by the people, and for the people that Abe Lincoln said 80 years after. Now, after this declaration of their independence, they now had to fight for their freedom. 7 years, an incredibly bloody war against tremendous odds. And they won. And they immediately, with the early Congresses, started to put in place institutions that would support their freedom, like the rule of law, the separation of governmental powers, the civilian control of the military, and a free market, free enterprise economy. They knew that the best way to protect their freedom and their future was to build a government, build a society of we, the people. And that's the part that these radical liberals, not all, but many in Augusta, in Washington, don't accept or don't understand. Socialism, as I understand it, and as you see it, is elevating the state or government above the freedom of the individual. The individual freedoms that are the bedrock of our country, our founding. All of our institutions were put in place, the judiciary, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, to protect individuals the right to determine their own destiny. But socialism does away with all that. Instead, it says the government is more important than you. Now, if you look at world history, as Peter mentioned earlier, during the past 30 years, socialist policies around the globe have been disappearing, on average, in general, and they've been migrating more towards free market, free enterprise ways of life and ways to run their country. And the reason for it is because, I think it was mentioned earlier, is that economies that don't focus on the individual and incentives to produce and be creative end up with lower standards of living, a shared mediocrity, fewer opportunities. I got to tell you this story. I'll never forget this as long as I live. I'm very close to Sammy for reasons that I'm very proud of. Tragically, but I'm very proud of the relationship I have with Sam. I call him, text him, or email him every single day. He's just a great kid. He spent his junior year in college at the University of Madrid, a semester abroad. A lot of kids do. Now, I've always told Sam, I said, Sam, I don't care if you end up in Manila, Hong Kong, Madrid, doesn't matter. Dad's coming to see you, man. And it was Thanksgiving. He said, Dad, they don't do Thanksgiving in Madrid. I said, well, they should. So I got myself a plane ticket, put on my New Balance shoes, made in Maine. My jeans, hopped on a plane and went over to see Sam during the Thanksgiving period in Madrid. I will never forget this as long as I live. He was introducing me to all of his buddies and this and that, and I was shocked to learn 80% of young adults, now this is 4 or 5 years ago, in Madrid live at home. Let me repeat that. The actual number is 80% of the young adults between 16 and 29 live at home. And the reason they live at home is because Socialist economies, central economies that do not respect individual freedom and risk-taking and entrepreneurship result in stagnant economies, high unemployment, low wages, low opportunities. I cannot tell you how many of his friends buttonholed me and said, Mr. Poliquin, I'll do anything. Can you bring me back to the States? I'll work for you at home. Maybe you can get me a job. I'll go to school there. I didn't know what the immigration issues were at the time, but I was really stunned by that experience. Now, here's some good news, because we're listening to some of these speakers, and they're wonderful, but I'm a very positive Frenchman. I look at this class. This is half full. In fact, this is 2/3 full. Not really. Liberals usually win elections by disguising who they are. Right? They pretend that they're conservative or moderates when they're really not. And they do that because we're right on the issues, and unfortunately, they're not. Or fortunately, they're not. However, this time is different because there's a presidential election going on. The media, who usually hides these Democrats, these liberals well, so they don't really tell you who they are, what they stand for, can no longer do it. In fact, I think there are 10 of them, Joe, on TV tonight, God help us, debating. Yes. So they're all going to try to out-give away this country to whoever's in the audience, right? So you and our young will see tremendous number of these opportunities that we can look and see for ourselves. They can no longer hide this, and Mr. Trump will make sure they do not. Now, let me give you a couple examples of why we should be incredibly concerned about losing our individual right to choose how to live our lives and turn it over to bureaucrats on the bet they can do better than we can to run our lives. If you look at recent polling, the number one issue on Americans' minds is health care. Now, how many times, and I'm 66 now, heck, I'm on Medicare. I'm on Social Security. They said I wanted to cut it. Go figure that one out. But how many times did Mom and Dad tell me, Bruce, the most important thing in your life is your health? I'm 16, I'm making chocolate, trying to drink beer, and get the car keys, right? Sure, yeah, Mom. They were right. You know it and I know it. They were absolutely right. Your health is the most important. So let's think about what the liberals are now proposing to us. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and AOC are taking the lead on this. They really run the party. And they think that bureaucrats can do a better job telling you what doctor you should have, what hospital you should go to, and what medical procedures you should have. I'll tell you, when Sammy was young, there is nothing I would not do to protect him, to keep him safe, to make sure he was healthy. Nothing I wouldn't do. Mom is 91, Dad's 88. I'm their guardians. There is nothing I wouldn't do to help my parents make sure they live out the rest of their lives in dignity and in good health. Now, here's what I mean by this. If you are in this audience, or you know others that are, one of 88,000 people in the state of Maine who are public school teachers working now or retired, like my father, or you're a state employee working now or retired, there are 88,000 of you. You have negotiated a specific health care plan that you like. If Elizabeth Warren gets her way and she wins the nomination, she probably will, and God forbid she becomes our commander-in-chief, and there's a majority in Congress, all those 88,000 people, their health care is canceled. I repeat that. Their health care is canceled, and you are all pushed into a 100% government-run program called Medicare for All. If you are one of 6,000 workers at Bath Iron Works and you work for the union, you've negotiated a contract that's very important to you, it is canceled, and you are pushed into the Medicare program. Now, here's where the problem runs. Right now, there are 332,000 fellow Mainers who are in the Medicare program. I'm one, I'm guessing a bunch of you are out there too. 332,000 of us. Move over. There are 720,000 Mainers who get their health care at work. Canceled. I repeat that. There is no private insurance, and you are pushed into this behemoth government, 100% government-run program called Medicare for All. By the way, what does that look like in Canada? People, have you noticed a lot of these liberals say, well, they do it in Canada, why in the heck shouldn't we do it? Because we're not Canada. I came from Canada. We're Americans. Now, let's look at Canada, just for the heck of it. If you need a routine MRI, your wait list is 11 weeks, almost 3 months. To get a heart operation in Canada, 6 months. If you need a routine knee replacement, it's almost 10 months. And it's just as bad in the UK. My father and mom used to spend some time in Florida when they were a little bit younger, and one of Dad's best friends was from the UK. His wife was American, he was British. He came down with a form of cancer, I can't remember, and died waiting for surgery. This is real stuff. Now, to help pay for this, which is going to cost $52 trillion over 10 years. Let me say that again. I almost can't say that. Our national debt, which is horrible, is $23 trillion. This is going to cost $52 trillion over 10 years. To try to pay for that, your individual and small business taxes double. They double. And if you're a doctor, a nurse, or a hospital, and you were dependent on the government for payment, because everyone would be in a government program, right? They cut your reimbursements for the procedures that you perform by 40%. These are not my numbers. These are studies that are done. 40% cut in the payment of providers for services of the folks in this program. Now, when I was representing you in the 2nd District, I was a mother bear when it came to our rural hospitals. I would fight tooth and nail for them. These rural hospitals will go under if there are 40% cuts to their reimbursement rates. And by the way, in the UK, they have a huge shortage of doctors and nurses. Guess why? Well, of course. Sam, Dad, I want to become a doctor. Are you crazy? They don't want to live through this type of system. So that is real what they are proposing. This is not me. This is not pie in the sky. This is America. This is what they're proposing. And they're trying to do the same thing here in Maine. I like the Republican plan. I like the free market plan. Let's protect Social Security for me. Demi, you're 20 years off. For me. I'm just kidding. If the press is watching this, I'm just kidding. Protect Social Security for our seniors. Strengthen it. Make sure that we support private health insurance and do everything we can to enhance competition, to drive down price, and to improve choices. It's pretty simple. But remember, in a socialist state, they do away with competition. They do away with individual incentives because the state, the government, in this care, healthcare. They run your healthcare. There's no competition. They run your healthcare. It is very scary to give up your freedom to care for yourself or your family members. The number 2 issue that polls today in America is jobs in the economy. Now, I don't know about you folks, but we are now in the state of Maine at the lowest unemployment rate ever recorded. Let me repeat that. The lowest unemployment rate ever recorded in the state of Maine. We have more people working than ever recorded in the state of Maine. This is terrific. We have more jobs than we have workers willing to take those jobs. I just had a problem with a toilet at one of my properties. It cost me $300 to fix the toilet. Now, the toilet was in rough shape, don't get me wrong. But I mean, these folks are doing well. And if you don't like your job, you've got job security because you get another one down the road. I have a landscape, a little company that doesn't work at one of my properties. And I called him up. I said, Rick, I need you over there. And he said, Bruce, he said, we are so busy, we can't do it. I said, what do you mean you can't do it? I said, I can't use a chainsaw. He said, look, we'll get you next spring if we can hire 2 more workers. When that happens and there's a labor shortage and we're at full employment here in the state of Maine, effectively we are, wages go up. Wages are rising faster in the state of Maine than most other states in the country. And guess what? The wages are going up faster for those that work with their hands. Our blue-collar workers, their wages are going up faster than the supervisors, and they should. Now, the Obama economy that we just came out of a few years ago was characterized by what? High taxes, high regulations, trade deals that were really hurting American workers and Maine workers. And what did you get? Few opportunities, high unemployment, stagnant wages. Now, the economy that we have today did not happen by accident. It happened because we embrace choice. We embrace competition. And so we lowered taxes so you can keep more of your own. It's not, how many times have I said this, Peter, since I was state treasurer? It is not the government's money. It's yours.
Amen.
And I happen to think you know how to spend it a heck of a lot better than a bunch of bureaucrats in Augusta or in Washington. Here's the difference. The liberals in Augusta and in Washington treat it like it's their money, not yours. That's why they're trying to do away with your individual choice, how you pick healthcare. And what about tax rates? Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, AOC, they're saying we need 70, 80%, 90% tax rates. Now, I will tell you folks, I've run a bunch of businesses in my life, and I'm going to tell you flat out. If 80% of the last dollar I made goes to government, I ain't going to do it. Why should I take my savings, my hard earnings, or my partners, or borrow money from a bank and take the risk that if my business fails, I still owe the loan? Why should I do that if 80% goes to the government? The goal, and our goal as Republicans, is keep more of your own money, make sure taxes are lower, make sure businesses are doing well so they keep more of their earnings so they can invest it in new equipment and hire more people and pay them more. And oh, by the way, and I tell this to my liberal friends, if you work for the hospital or you work for a nonprofit or you work for the library, guess what you are dependent on? Tax revenues, right? Well, what generates tax revenues? People working, making more money, and businesses being successful. The difference is we trust the individual, we want them to take risk, we want them to start businesses, and we want them to create new jobs. I got to tell you another story. After Jane died, Sammy was 17 months old, and I stayed in touch with a lot of her friends at the time. They were in the museum business. God bless them. They were very liberal. Doesn't matter. Jane was coming along. She was almost there. But one of her great friends and her husband, Gwen, was from Massachusetts. She moved to the Netherlands, and she married a Dutch fella, and she worked over in a museum, I think still does, over in Amsterdam. So they visited one year. Sammy was 7, and their daughter, their only child, was 5. And we had them for a week. And so we did wonderful people. We just love them. I love kids and the whole thing. And the husband's name, who I won't say, because it wouldn't be appropriate. I said, now tell me, I know what Gwen does, but what do you do over there? He says, well, I do a little bit of painting, and I do a little bit of this, and I listened. I'm the host. I'm very polite. And I said, okay. I said, well, what's your career? And his wife spoke up and says, well, he doesn't work. And I'm saying to myself, I was 40 at the time, roughly. I said, this guy's my age. He's healthy. He's out there kayaking and he's got a wetsuit on. Doesn't look too good, but neither did I. And I said to myself, well, Gwen, how's that possible? He says, well, in our country, you don't have to work if you don't want to, but the government still pays you. Really? Tax rates at the time were 72%. In the Netherlands, they're now 52%. Guess who is proposing a universal government paycheck if you choose not to work? The Liberal Democrats. That is socialism. How would I think about raising my son Sam, giving him all the benefits that I could, unconditional love, the best education for him, and a good, sound moral compass so he knows the difference between right and wrong. And all of a sudden, at 21 years of age, he graduates, says, Dad, I'm ready to go. I want to be on every government program I can find. And oh, by the way, they're going to pay me $1,000 a month to do nothing. Can you imagine giving up on a child like that? I don't want to ever give up on anybody. I want folks to work. There's dignity in all work. And it doesn't matter if you're painting metal roofs or digging sewer lines or cleaning toilets like I did to get going. There's dignity in every work, and you start at the bottom and you work your way up. It was Abraham Lincoln who said clearly, you do not help the poor by penalizing the successful. That is exactly what the folks in Augusta are trying to do when they did away with work requirements for welfare. That I just about croaked myself to get in the Farm Bill, and Governor LePage did with success here in Maine. They just unwound it. Now, let's talk about one more thing. Two more things, quickly. Do you know that today America is more secure from a national security standpoint, and our economy is stronger, in great part is because we are now energy independent.
Amen.
Now think about that for a minute. Let's think about that for a minute. Is that we develop all the oil and natural gas and kerosene and propane and jet fuel and biomass and wind and solar. We generate as much as we need to run our lives, fuel our economy, and take care of our businesses. Wow, isn't that great? And guess what? We now have a president that says, you know, I don't think we want to send our kids in uniform over to the Middle East anymore because it's dangerous and they don't like us. And guess what? We don't need them for our energy. I love it. I love it. Well, the reason for that is because as free enterprise, free market Republicans, we believe in the development of all sources of energy. And let's increase production, drive down the price, and give people the option. You decide how to heat your home, how to drive to work. That's not what Augusta's trying to do to you. That's not what Washington is trying to do to you. In Washington, you have Mr. Trump to stop that. In Augusta, you do not. So let me tell you what it looks like. And this was not long ago, and I know Lester's here somewhere. This was not long ago. The Maine legislature had a real bill on the table being debated in committee, a $110 tax for every tank you fill up in the basement. Now, a tank of oil in the basement is 275 gallons. For those of you in the media who might not get this right, the tax was 40 cents on a gallon. Times 275 gallons is $110 every time you fill that up. So what Augusta is telling you is that we don't trust you in knowing how to heat your homes. 2/3 of Maine homes still use heating oil to some degree. Half of the homes use wood to some degree. All these carbon energies they want to get rid of. How about letting you make that decision instead of them? Because I'll tell you another real problem with this. If you go down the road not too far, Rick, you're going to go to one of our terrific paper mills over in Rumford. It was just recently bought by a Hong Kong company called ND Dragon. I met the owners. They are really interested in that mill, and they just bought the shuttered mill in Old Town, and they're opening up another 125 jobs up there. Guess what they burn in Rumford? Chipped up little tires. Chipped up tires. So instead of putting them in a landfill, they burn them. And it's so hot, the residue is almost non-existent. Guess what they burn up at Sappy Paper in Skowhegan? 850 jobs. Rumford has 650 jobs. And Old Town's going to have another 125 jobs. They burn natural gas. They're both carbon fuels. Good luck, Janet Mills. Good luck, Governor Mills. Why don't you call up Mr. Liu, who just invested a ton of money in the Rumford and Old Town plant, and say, oh, by the way, you can't burn tires anymore and you can't use natural gas anymore. What do you think that family's going to do? Sure, they're going to leave. So get ready for a carbon tax. The governor and the legislative leaders in Augusta, the liberals, they made it really clear they're having a climate council of sorts. They're going to, I mark my word, there's going to be a carbon tax of some form. I like our idea of free enterprise, competition, all forms of energy, you choose, but the socialist Democrats think that you can't make that decision, so they're going to make it for you. It would ruin our economy and really kill millions of jobs. I'm going to tell you another story. And it's my fourth point, my last point. I was at Dunkin' Donuts. I love Dunkin' Donuts. And I was standing in line with a lady, and she said, Mr. Poliquin. I said, Bruce, for God's sake, Bruce. She said, Bruce. She said, how are your parents? I said, they're fine, thank you very much. And she said, you know, it's driving me crazy. Folks are coming over the border. There have been 850,000, she knew the number, 850,000 this last year. They came in illegally, and they come in this country, they want everything free, and we give it to them. I said, well, not everybody does that, but I know what you mean. And then she looked over her shoulder, and she said, goodness, shh, someone might hear us. And you know, we both chuckled. We both chuckled. And then I said to myself, how sad. How many, I bet everybody in this room has had a similar experience. On Veterans Day, we celebrated Joe and all of our other veterans. See Jack Wibby back here. All of our other veterans, I know there are a bunch in this room, and I love you all for it. We celebrated you for standing up for our Constitution and our freedom. And you fought and you served to stand up for our First Amendment, our ability to speak freely and openly, practice religion or not, and assemble freely like this. And now the socialist Democrats are trying to shout us down. Don't be intimidated. I got to tell you a story. Is that 5? But it's connected to 4. University of Michigan's got a new, University of Michigan, Peter, has a new problem. The University of Michigan just lost a court case. They have something called the bias police at the University of Michigan. And a federal court said it is unconstitutional to have a group of individuals that will say, you know, son, or you, ma'am, you made someone else feel uncomfortable with your speech. As a result, we're going to discipline you. Are you kidding me? So now the University of Michigan is in the process of disbanding their bias police. Guess what? There are 200 other universities and colleges across America that have similar speech regulating bodies. That is the First Amendment. That is wrong, but that's what happens when you have individuals that don't trust your ability to speak your mind freely, to choose your health care, to take care of your family the way you want, to choose the type of oil or not, the way you heat your homes and drive to work, and they don't trust you that you should have more money than the government does, even though you earned it. That's the difference. Now, here's what I'd like to leave you with. What can we learn from tonight, in my opinion? Number 1, the liberal Democrats are dead serious about this. This is no longer pie in the sky stuff. They are implementing this as fast as they can in Augusta. It's all around you. I gave you a couple examples. So that means we must take it seriously also. Secondly, it was Jefferson who said, constant vigilance is the price of our liberties. As business people, and I am one and proud of it, it's so frustrating when you can't fix a problem and move on. You can't in discourse in a representative republic. It is constant vigilance of working hard, engaging people, win the debates, and go get them to the polls. And lastly, be a happy warrior. I'm a happy person. We should be happy. We live on the freest country that's ever given birth, humanity's ever given birth to. And most of us, I know Jose wasn't, but most of us were lucky enough to be born here. My son was born here. My parents were born here. My grandparents were, and then the generation before that swam the St. Croix River or something. Now, we are Americans, and we need to make sure we continue to stand up, be bold, and protect what is good and right about America. And it is not losing our freedoms to the government. When that happens, we really get in trouble. God bless you all. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Jim Hoy, South Portland.
Yeah, Jim.
Just a point of interest, I've been working in Canada for the last 7 years in the oil and gas industry up there. And the province of Saskatchewan has a carbon tax. So what it's essentially done is strip the middle income of any disposable income.
Right.
So they get them at the point of sale. So it's all the utilities for the electricity, all the utilities for gas, and they get taxed on a square meter of housing footprint. So essentially that's what they do. So the end result is there's a groundswell protest about it. The other thing is they can't really tell what the government's doing with the money after they collect it. They can't point at it and say, that's what we're getting. So just a point of interest about the carbon tax.
I really appreciate, Jim, you mentioned that. One thing that everyone should be aware of is here in the state of Maine, 1/3 of our seniors, 1/3 of our seniors have only Social Security. That's all. No savings, no pension, 1/3 only Social Security, and the average Social Security check in Maine is $1,300 a month. So a regressive carbon tax on heating oil, gasoline, diesel, propane, kerosene, whatever it might be, hurts the elderly and the poor the most. Thank you for bringing it up, Jim. Yep.
Darwin Vale from Gray.
Daryl, is it?
Darwin.
Darwin.
Vale.
Beg your
All
pardon.
right.
Yes, sir.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
What is being done about ranked choice voting in Maine, if anything?
That's a great question. I needn't tell you folks is that we won on Election Day by 2,200 votes, right? It was the biggest ripoff in the world. I just testified in front of the Massachusetts legislature, written testimony in front of their committee of jurisdiction, and I got a call 4 days ago from a legislator in Alaska, and they're trying to roll it out in Alaska. This is really up to the Maine GOP, but I will tell you, Darwin, there is not a day that goes by that 1, 2, 3 people who I don't know come up to me and say, Bruce, I am so angry, not at you, you got ripped off. I am so angry that my vote didn't count.
Right.
What happened to 200 years, one person, one vote, the person that gets the most votes on Election Day wins? Remember, rank voting is not a Maine idea. This came to Maine by big money, out-of-state special interests, and in the end, put enough ad time when having to push it over the top. And when folks come back to you and say, well, the people of Maine want it. Wait a minute. When it was passed by 28% of registered voters voted, and only 15% voted for this. And the 2nd District of Maine rejected it twice. It is a complete scam. The biggest voter ripoff in Maine's history. Now, what can we do about it? I will tell you that we have a ton of people, an army of people, as Debbie mentioned, that would collect signatures to get this on the ballot and get rid of it. I took it through district court. I took it to the first appellate court in Boston. We were not going to get it to the Supreme Court.
When will they?
Demi? Yep.
As you know, it is now going to be law for the general election in 2020 for our president, right? And so, but the bill hasn't been enacted yet because what Janet doesn't want it to affect is a Democratic primary. So we need to wait till that happens, and then we believe that we will be getting some help. We just have to wait this out because we want to stay the bill for the November elections.
But isn't the presidential election spelled out in the Constitution, unlike the state election? That was the whole thing, right?
Well,
They can't do it for the president, right? It's illegal.
The other way, if I may.
Take it up.
The Maine State, it's a really good question. The Maine State Constitution says that you can elect your state officials with a plurality, but it was silent on federal elections. That's why I was the first one in the country to have used it. So isn't that amazing? Is that you can't elect your governor and your state reps with ranked voting, but you can do it for federal elections. Susan Collins is on this right now. Here's the problem with this, and Demi, we talk about this all the time, and along with Jason Savage, is that it is no longer, because of this scam, the best people competing head-to-head. It's no longer that. So as a Democrat, what they're going to do is get someone whose only issue is animal rights. Their only issue is pro-choice. Their only issue is, silencing free speech and taking away your guns, right? And on our side, we should get someone who should run as an independent. That's the only issue is the Second Amendment and pro-life and so forth and so on. And then no campaigns. You don't have the. You're not going to win, and they know it. And that's what two of our competitors said. They're not going to win. But just make sure you vote for this candidate, the Democrat or the Republican, as your second choice. What a scam! It's now how do you game the system? But that's what we have to live under this next cycle. Just want to let you know. So I hope our candidates are smart enough to make sure that they recognize that and deal with it accordingly.
They're not. Those seniors you were just talking about, they're not going to vote because they don't understand.
It's, by the way, I agree with you completely. We did a poll when things settled down. You won't believe this one. Of the Republicans who did not vote, just as you said, the number one reason the Republicans did not vote, 26%, the number one reason is confusion of ranked voting. Yeah, it's a way to suppress voter turnout on our side. Yeah, it's horrible. It's absolutely. So we've got to deal with it, and we're really looking, I hate to put you on the spot, at the Republican Party here in Maine to get this organized, to get it on the only way we can do it now is get it on the ballot next year and deep six it. But that wouldn't happen until next November. That means we got to live with it for this next cycle.
And you need to educate the seniors.
That's everybody's responsibility. I agree with you. I do it all the time. I'm doing it now. I did it on Facebook. Go to my Facebook page. It has my 2-page testimony in front of the Massachusetts Legislative Committee. It's only 2 pages. Tells you everything you need to know and share it with everybody. Yes?
What about Matt Dunlap? Because he's the one who put the question, so it made it so confusing. I worked the Freeport polls that day, and
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people came up to the ballot machine and said, "Oh, I'm so glad the signs told me how to vote." And it was yes, when you really should have been voting the other way. But that's how we got it, because he makes the question so
Of course.
tricky.
Remember, these elections really matter, and Augusta is controlled by very liberal Democrats because they won the elections. If you go to their website and play that 5-minute cartoon that explains ranked voting, you're more confused after the cartoon than when you first looked at it. I agree with you completely.
We have one
Yep.
question over here.
Yeah, I beg your pardon.
Right here.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Ted Siroy from Saco.
Hey, Ted.
Hi.
Siroy, you're a Frenchman like me.
Siroy, oui.
Yeah, we're probably related.
If you look at the spending for the last election, it shows obviously that the Democrats did not win it, they purchased the last election.
Yeah.
Is there any way we can stop this flood of money that comes from the Soros, the Bloombergs, the Sussmans from out of state, which is obviously, tipping the elections to the Democrats' side?
I don't think so. I don't know, but I don't think so. But I will tell you this, and Governor LePage proved this, is we do not need, our candidates do not need all the money in the world to win, Ted. They need enough money to get their message out. I will tell you this, you talking to your neighbors and friends, watching the Patriots, I hope, or at Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter, or in line at Dunkin' Donuts, your conversation with that individual is worth more than any TV ad you can see, any mailer in the mailbox, or any radio ad. It is incumbent upon us, constant vigilance. We need to do the work, but I'll tell you a frightening thing, an absolutely terrifying thing that I bet a lot of you folks haven't heard of yet. There is something called Act Blue. This is a web of Democrat donors around the country that has an internet platform, and so Jared Golden can go and be one of the featured candidates on Act Blue, and money, small dollar donations that you do not have to report, to the Ethics Commission and so forth and so on, come in over the transom. We were outspent by $6 million. There was money that came in. He had no idea who it is. Act Blue. We are now trying to come up with an antidote to that. It's called Win Red. The president has the largest small donor database in the world. It's not Mr. Obama. It's not Mr. Sanders. It's Mr. Trump. And we've gotten that organized. We're starting to do that now, but we're way behind. Very scary.
Okay, one more.
Jack.
Bruce, you mentioned that the national debt is now at $23 trillion.
Horrible. Yes.
You didn't mention that the interest on the debt is now at $374 billion.
Yeah.
What happens if the government fails to pay the interest on the debt?
You can't. You can't. It would be a financial calamity that we couldn't even describe. You can't. These are bonds, treasury bonds and bills that are sold around the world and here domestically to investors. And every 6 months we have to pay interest on that. And when they mature in 5, 10 years, we have to pay the principal back. You must pay. If you don't, you're in trouble. Jack raises a very important point. And I would fight tooth and nail about this in Congress, and why the first bill I spoke about on the floor was a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. Here's why. The interest, that interest that Jack mentioned, almost $400 billion a year right now, the Veterans Affairs budget is $190 billion. The interest on the debt is twice what we spend in a year to care for 7 million veterans who gave us our freedom. So it is becoming a budgetary issue. And Mr. Trump, he's just not there yet. He's just not there yet. The House, the Republicans are there, absolutely there. In fact, if you look, and I don't want to get too much in the weed, Peter, but if you look at a pie chart, 70% of the spending at the federal government, your taxes go to Washington, not Augusta, Washington, 70% are spent on 3 programs: Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest on the debt. They are all growing at arguably 5, 6, 7% a year, but our revenues are growing at 3%. It's getting worse, not better. The third of the budget that is discretionary that we have, that Congress has a say over, we've kept it pretty much flat for the last 8 years. But that's not the problem. But I'll tell you, you stand up and you say we've got to fix these programs, the AARP comes after you and says, oh my gosh, Poliquin wants to end Medicare and Social Security. Completely false. Remember, we had this problem in Maine with the Maine State Retirement Center, and we fixed it. You haven't heard a hoot for 8 years because we fixed the problem. We can fix this problem. And you don't touch seniors, Jack. You don't touch folks that are on the program or close to it now. You talk to this fella here who's 17. You talk to my son, Sam, who's 29. You say, if we don't make adjustments, you ain't going to have the programs. We know how to do this. It's simple math, but you need to have the guts to do it. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you all. Great speakers. Thank you so much. We're 15 minutes over. You've got a survey if you want to leave it here, if you filled it out, or mail it in. God bless you all. Thank you for coming. Have a great night. And don't forget to visit your Republican Town Committee meetings.